Chiron is a teacher archetype. We are meant to be actually somehow putting our greatest pain on a stage. There is another concept to Chiron I associate him with, and that's a Freudian psychological concept called the repetition compulsion, or some people also call it as trauma reenactment, or something like that, which is very much about repeating physical or emotional painful situations all over again. For example, if I had experienced, a great way to approach it is from the Nessus point of view, which is the asteroid of abuse. When we are abused as a child, we might be actually kind of like reacting to that abuse in three different ways. So one is that either we surround ourselves with bullies in our life, or we become the bully, and then, kind of like at school, I'm gonna be daring someone, or you surround yourself with people like your own abuser, or you treat yourself in an abusive way.
What if the part of you that feels most broken is actually your most powerful portal to wholeness? This episode is not about fixing you, it is about revealing you. So meet AstroViktor, a rebel astrologer, a psychological mystic, and cosmic truth teller. Together, we crack open the myth of Chiron, not just as a wounded healer, but as the keeper of your original heartbreak. The one that shaped how you love, how you speak, how you hide, and how you rise. So, if you are ready to stop making peace with pain and start making meaning from it, come closer. The stars are not up there to control you. They are in here to awaken you. So let us begin. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which side of the planet you are sitting on at this very moment. We have a special guest, a guest that I'm super excited about. We've got AstroViktor. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, and welcome to everyone as well who is listening.
So, Victor, is it okay I'll call you Victor moving forward?
Absolutely.
The way that we love to start the show is we always love to ask our guests to share with us what inspired you to do what you do today.
Well, really, it was kind of like an accident how I bumped into astrology, actually. There are no accidents, but, life kind of put that on my path. My grandmother passed away. She was the one who raised me. And then I had to grow up really quickly. So I moved to the capital city of Hungary. And one day I just went to rent a video. Back in the days, of course, there was no DVD players and all these type of things. So yeah, I went to this shop and then I found this business card which said tarot reading. And I even didn't have a clue what tarot cards were. But it was saying that it gives you prediction and these type of things. So I got intrigued and then I picked up the card. And I remember the price of a reading was 1/3 of my monthly salary at that time. I was like, it's a big investment, but let me have a look at it. And I was actually amazed. So this lady made me draw a picture, and then she analyzed it, and then she really put my life on the table. And then she used, of course, tarot cards. And then she said to me, you are so gifted. I want to teach you free of charge because one day I think I'm going to be in your bio. And that's how the journey started. So I started studying some how to analyze drawings from a psychological point of view, tarot cards, kinesiology, touch for health, and these type of things. And then one day, she said to me, oh, there was going to be an astrology course starting one of the most famous teachers in Hungary. So do you want to visit it? And then I was like, yeah, let's go for it. And that's how it all started. And since then, I have been studying astrology every single day.
I love it. And I've never heard of the psychology of a drawing. So yeah, I'm a little bit curious about that. So are you talking about like just a pencil drawing, or was it like an actual piece of art, what you had to do to be able to analyze the psychology of it?
No, it's not an art, so you don't need to be a talented drawer to be able to. Actually, I'm going to give you, and because I love doing that still. So I give you pencils or pens, different colors. I need you to choose. I actually give you, let's say, maximum 10 minutes. Let's see how quick you are, how slow you are doing it, and so forth. And I'm giving you 7 elements. And the only direction I give you is that you need a kind of like a demographic mark on the left-hand side of the paper from top to bottom. And I would like you to write certain words down there. And the words are a house, fire, water, snake, knife, sun, and a tree. And I would like you to compose kind of like a picture out of that. And then you put it wherever you want, how you want it. And basically after I'm going to be folding these drawings because certain into 9 little squares, and each square is going to be representing something else within that drawing. And obviously how you combine the elements and so forth. So it's a very powerful tool. Obviously, psychology uses the tree test. So it's a little bit of a modern version of that. This was developed, by the way, by Russian psychologists to pinpoint medical issues within people. And it got taken further by psychologists, and then now it has become kind of like a psychological test to give personality traits and see what happened to you in the past, how your present is impacted by those, and so on. I highly recommend this. It's a very powerful tool.
Oh, wow. I've never heard of it and I'm so intrigued. So when you're saying that the actual the picture itself will give you an indication of the individual's not just psychology but health. So what's going on within their physical, mental or emotional body.
Absolutely. This was developed sometimes in the 80s. So this is not something new. But as I said, it got taken further, and then now it's kind of like a psychological tool as well. For example, you can easily see if someone has got eye problems, heart problems, and so forth. So the different elements of that drawings um, takes you to different body parts, actually, where certain type of issues are. So, for example, well, I don't want to give away too much because someone might want to try it one day, but for example, the knife is always going to be a representation of the anger. So I've seen examples where someone actually, stabs the tree, and which could indicate that you have got major issues with your roots, especially if it's at the trunk of the tree, which represents the roots. It's just like in astrology, the root of the tree is going to be very much about the IC, and then the crown of the tree is going to be the MC. So again, highly dependent where you put that knife, because if it's at the root, then you are very angry with your roots and your family and so forth. And then if you put that somewhere around the crown, I've seen examples where someone killed a little bird, but they were in the crown part of the tree. So obviously that's going to be something to do with your MC, and then maybe the directions you are unsure about how to go, where to go in life. And that little bird can represent something there. Maybe, it's the element of freedom, for example. So it's really intriguing tool.
Oh wow.
One day, surely I'm going to be teaching about this.
I think you should. And when you do, let us know. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people interested. I'm intrigued. And I love the fact that you linked it back to astrology. So obviously it's linked to astrology because you talked about the MC and the IC. So is that how you got into astrology? Is starting with that? Was that the
No, no.
path?
Originally it is not linked to astrology at all, but I kind of started making the colorations between the natal chart and how a person draws a picture. But you know what, even talking about this, you cannot really control your subconscious. So I tried myself drawing a picture, kind of like the perfect picture, and it's impossible. So even though if I spoke about the elements that the sun is going to talk to you about your future, as well as something to do with father figure, you won't be able to. By the way, the sun represents the head in drawing, so you would see migraine, headaches, and something head injuries as well, and so on. Especially if the rays of the sun are showing certain type of signs, that's typically some type of head injuries or even head traumas as well. Yeah, it's a very interesting
Wow.
subject.
I love it. And so then you moved into astrology, and what is your specialty around astrology specifically?
I
What do you?
have a stellium in the 10th house. So for me, vocational call was always a very intriguing topic. And I would say 90% of my clients reach out to me because of a vocational call. And I think I have pretty much become an expert. So I can really guide people what type of jobs they need and what type of jobs might give them financial satisfaction. So that's one of my specialties. I'm not too big on relationship astrology. If I need to be completely frank, it doesn't mean I cannot do it, but it's not my favorite topic to work with. And I but highly like psychological astrology. So I studied psychology myself. I've never finished the school because it was too dry and boring for me. So I did 3 years. But I'm very intrigued how certain type of archetypes are playing out. And I like giving people remedies about how to overcome certain type of challenges. But this is not the remedy type where I'm going to tell you to wear a piece of rock or put it in your pocket. This is more of a psychological remedy. So, for example, if I'm talking about a Venus and Moon, let's say square, and I mean, it can mean multiple things depending on the sign and the house position, but that's the archetype of a whether to become a mom or to become a lover. And often the person might be struggling to be able to take on both roles. And therefore, it can lead to weight gain. It could lead to kind of like a defensive mode, a defensive mechanism, which obviously going to be appearing in the body as well at one point. So my aim during my sessions is to give them like a option to use the planetary energies in the highest form, which we need to practice. So if we think about Erickson, who was one of the greatest psychologists, in my opinion, he says that if you practice something for 10,000 hours, it becomes a talent and people tend to forget about it. We don't need to be born with talents. We need to be practicing something for a very long time. And then it becomes natural. It becomes, psychology also says, for example, that if you practice something for 30, 31 days, then it becomes naturally easier for you to do. So, for example, the diet. If you do it for 30 days, it becomes kind of norm and then it becomes easier to actually lose weight. So I'm a firm believer that if we practice planetary alignments in a positive way, and for example, with Venus and Moon, as the example I have given, it will be extremely important to, for example, beautify things around yourself to make sure that your mood is uplifted. Moon is the planet of mood, and Venus is the planet of beautification. Rather than wanting to get validation, Venus continuously from the mom, for example, because unfortunately, with that aspect, we have got something to do with the acceptance by the mom. Often a Venus moon aspect is a competition with the mom as well, because the mom might have been struggled to give birth to a baby because my body is going to be, deformed and I have sacrificed something. I've lost my beauty. and I'm only seeing a beautiful girl, and she has taken away my beauty, and now she is beautiful. So it can become a competition, especially if there is Mars involvement as well. So by being aware of all these, we can just come up with some kind of like practices to be able to use the highest manifestation of the planet. You know, it's Saturn, one of my favorite ones, and I'm going to be doing a webinar, I think next month, about the positive qualities of Saturn. Saturn is such a feared planet, but on one hand, it's due to traditional astrology because they only saw Saturn as black and white. And I even practice a traditional astrology though. However, I'm not close-minded. So I like Saturn. Saturn is actually very weak in my chart, but it works brilliantly because I've mastered it. So if, for example, from a medical point of view, Saturn, you know, the remedies of Saturn, we're going to have to be able to build, for example, building muscles. We're going to have to be consistent. We're going to have to be even persistent. If we just think about the tarot card, Saturn is represented by the Hermit card with the little lamp and then going on top of the mountain. So we need that type of kind of like directions in life, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, knowing where I'm heading in life. And then if, you know, nowadays it might be very difficult for people with Saturn being in the sign of Pisces. Oh, I practice tropical astrology. So, you know, and it's not because one system works better than the other. It's just that's my preference. Both system works brilliantly. So if someone practices Vedic astrology, that's great. That works too. We just operate on different systems, therefore, um, you know, different rules as well. So both works. I usually say that whatever system you use, that's great. It depends on the operator and not on the system. So I see this debate in the astrological community about which house system is better. There are 36 house systems for a reason, because none works perfectly and every single works brilliantly. So we don't need to get hung up on what system, what branches of astrology we need to go with. I usually tell my students, because I teach 2-3 times a week, that stick to one system. Once you have become an expert, play around with others and see which one fits the mold and take it from there. But the best piece of advice I would give here is that, you know, the orbs, for example, make up your own rules and stick to it. And don't make those rules according to your own natal chart, because usually I would give just 5-degree orb for Venus and Moon trine, for example, but mine is 6. So let's just be a little bit lenient and let's give 6-degree now because that fits my chart better. I have made those mistakes as well when I was a rookie at the beginning. Now I'm pretty strict about it, and I just work with what I have come up with.
That's brilliant. I've got a couple of questions that have bubbled up for me. So I'm glad you talked about Saturn. I'm actually going through my second Saturn return, and in my Saturn is in my 5th house. So to me, it's been like a real taskmaster, and it's like it's time. So it's for me, it's actually pushed me forward to doing things I've been procrastinating about. So I feel like I've been working really well with my Saturn. So I'm glad that you brought that up. And then you were talking about the working with the psychology and the archetypes. So do you specifically do you work with the 8th house and the 12th house, working more of the 8th house more on that psychological, the deep psychological aspect, and the 12th house more of that unconscious or subconscious aspect? Is that how you work within the chart, and then seeing what kind of archetypes sit in those houses? Is that how you work from the psychological aspect?
We can definitely approach that way. So I would add to it, because I feel like the 6th house is also misunderstood in many cases. And 6th house is highly psychological, because That's the first sign, which is in a quincunx aspect to the rising sign. And the rising sign is the decision-making point in our chart. So if we follow the sun's journey, then from a Earth perspective, and that's important to mention because actually the planets rotate in different ways how we see them, then the sun is the individuation process. And because there is no aspect between the sixth and the first house, therefore it shows crisis situation in the ego. That's why the sixth house tends to be worrying a lot and they want to create perfection. And there could be kind of like accidents, and in the physical manifestation, sixth house is the house of accidents. And the sixth house is the planetary joy of Mars, which is obviously the planet of struggles. And often we need to be able to cut something out of our life with Mars in order for us to be able to achieve something, because that's the highest manifestation of Mars. So I've walked away from the concept of malefic and benefic planets. Even if I do a beautiful Jupiter in your chart, I'm still going to talk about the positives and the negatives as well, because it highly depends on you whether you use them right or wrong. So I have a beautiful Venus, and I don't use, unfortunately, Venus really well in my life. So Venus in Pisces, just as an example, it can be the overspender, and they get the validations through shopping sprees. And then I feel good in my own skin when I buy a pair of shoes. For example, I've got about 35 pairs of shoes. I've got about 75 perfumes. So that's the type of obsession with certain type of beauty element. I had 6 plastic surgeries in my life, and 5 of them were within 3 years due to major weight loss. But you see, I don't use Venus extremely well. But if we use that well, that Venus can become extremely beautiful and rewarding in our chart. So going back to the sixth house, because has got planetary joy in the sixth house, there is always a need there to transform something. Which is obviously brings in the topic of Aries and Scorpio archetype in our chart. If we don't do that, it brings a lot of struggles, especially with Mars at the beginning of our life, maybe the first 25, 30 years of our life. Mars position is a struggle, and therefore the sixth house could become a struggle as well. Not necessarily from a medical point of view. This is more about the crisis situation in the ego part. However, I am a firm believer that every single house shows psychological matters. So from a psychological point of view, the signs are kind of like built on each other. Aries cusp of our chart is the first 18 months of our life. And then if we start talking about a baby, what they do, then, it's about entitlement. Mommy cannot leave the room for 2 seconds. Otherwise, I'm going to be screaming on top of my lungs. And then we think that we are one with mom. And then obviously going forward, the Taurus part of our chart represents age 18 months to 4 years old, which is going to be very much about the potty training period, Scorpio as the toilet, Taurus as the food, but also something to do with the development of our sex too. That's the age when we discover that we have got our private parts, and then actually we cause pleasure to ourselves as well. And if something happens during that period, then the guilt comes into the picture. And that's the opposing sign, Scorpio, and so forth. So each of these are built on each other, and we are being impacted by them. Therefore, I wouldn't categorically say that we need to just look at the 8th house and the 12th house from a psychological point of view. Every single house and sign will have their psychological connotation.
That makes sense. Absolutely. And so when you were talking about looking at the medical aspect from a healing aspect, what do you look? I know before you and I jumped on this podcast interview, we talked about Chiron, and I'd love to really unpack Chiron as the wounded healer. And from my understanding, and it could be completely wrong, is that we teach from our healings, like we learn from our wounds, and then we teach others from the healings of our wounds. That's how I see Chiron. I could be wrong though.
No, you are absolutely right. You are pretty much using the concept of what others use in regards to Chiron. I tend to look at Chiron a little bit differently, though. Um, I think Chiron actually represents pretty much our childhood, kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Kind of like the messages that we receive from our parents. It's pretty much the learnings which gets burned into our subconscious. So what I'm trying to, these are typically experiences that we go through, especially in the first 7 years of our life. That's when 75% of our personality is formed anyway. And then we are highly influenced by our parents. So we tend to be copying our parents. There is no exception about that, or whoever is raising us. So I think Chiron, the wounded healer, great, and then it becomes your greatest assets. And that's true if you work well with Chiron. But for me, Chiron actually represents rejection. So one of the first things when we think about Chiron, or when we think about any type of new planets that got discovered, astrology tends to be looking at the mythological part of that. Obviously, we have got a discovery chart, and then we have a feeling about what the story might be. And then we associate it with a mythological figure. So looking at the mythology of Chiron, yes, he was, the healing arts, the botany, the pharmacy, the herbs, the medicine, pretty much. But I don't think Chiron is the ultimate medical factor in our chart. Actually, that would be more to do with Hygeia, or the father of Hygeia, I just wanted to say it very quickly. Jesus. Um, Hold on, it does come to my mind in a second. Anyway, the father of Hygeia, and also Chariclo could be talking to you about medical matters. And there are quite a lot of asteroids. Actually, I just did recently a webinar on about 15 asteroids that are connected to healing. So Chiron for me is so the Chiron mythology is that actually he was poisoned by the arrow of Hydra's blood in his leg, and therefore he was in eternal pain. And he experienced what pain humans might go through in their life. And then he wanted to trade his life with Prometheus, and eventually Zeus granted his wish. But he was made immortal, so he would be able to heal others as well. Now, Chiron is interesting because it's a half human and half animal. So it's very important to embrace both the human consciousness and the animal instincts with Chiron. And what are the animal instincts? It's about survival, self-preservation. And by the way, Chiron was rejected as a child. Actually, the woman who gave birth to him asked the gods to take his son away, as she could not accept how ugly her child was. So often, what happens with Chiron is that we are not accepted, we are rejected. Chiron actually represents mother issues in our chart, while Pallas Athene would be a representation of father issues, but that's another topic. And what happened was that Apollo and Pallas Athene raised Chiron. And this is where the artist side of Chiron comes into the picture, as well as the healing, because one of the healing asteroid in our chart is actually Apollo. But also he was very much of a was very much a multi-talented person, and then he did art as well, and then he did divination tools. Obviously, we're talking about the Delphi oracles and so forth. He was kind of like the boss of those. But for me, Chiron is about rejection, mother issues, not being accepted mostly, and what type of messages or experiences we had through the mom. You asked me about the 12th house. I tend to be working with the 12th house differently as well. The 12th house for me is very much about your preconditioning alongside with Chiron. So what preconditioning means is that we are all born with expectations. And psychology says differently. And this is where astrology and psychology kind of can go separate ways. Psychology says that you are born with a clean slate. Astrology says it's not true because, and I think it's not true. The reason why, because while mommy is pregnant with us, we are connected with the world through a tube. That's where the information comes into the baby through the food, through the hormones of the mom. And if I'm stressed, the stress hormone. And if I'm happy, the happiness hormone, and so forth. So the 12th house, if someone has got planets in the 12th house, those are something that we expected that we would receive. The 12th house is the house of Eden, of garden. So it's all about wanting the most beautiful life ever. Because when we think about the Bible, Adam and Eve had everything they ever needed. They had animals, they had trees, they had fruits, they had sunshine, they could be naked, and all those type of stuff. And but they touched the tree, right? And they were not supposed to. And that's where, unfortunately, things have fallen apart. So going back to Chiron, I think these are two indicators of our preconditioning, what we were taught by our parents and what we expected from life. The other major indication, which I highly recommend to people to look into, is the prenatal eclipse chart. Because prenatal eclipse means that mommy was already pregnant with you. And it highly talks to you about the experiences the mom had. And I've tested this. It works brilliantly. I am able to describe the feelings of the mom really well and how they have impacted your life in this current incarnation and why you are making certain type of choices because the very initial experiences you had. So Chiron is about acceptance. We need to be able to accept that specific part of our chart. Yes, we can become a teacher with that. So for example, I've got Chiron in the fifth house. Sorry, in the third house, you have the fifth, third house. And I was publicly humiliated multiple times as a child. I was publicly humiliated at school because mispronouncing words in German or in English. So I have become very conscious about it. And I have become quite meticulous when it comes to speaking a language. I don't like making grammar mistakes. Actually, I hate when someone is picking up on my accent and I become defensive. And I tell them, listen, I speak four languages. Probably you speak one. So, don't criticize me because I've got an accent. I'm never going to be British and I'm never going to be American. And I find it, yeah, that's my defense mechanism. And I go wild. So, but I have overcome my issues with communication and now I teach, I publicly speak. This has become my greatest asset. So I do look at Chiron also from a vocational point of view as well. Chiron is all about a victimization. We might be suffering quite a lot with the position of Chiron in our chart. But also, there is this approach to Chiron that it's a bridge builder because it's being between Saturn and Uranus. And how I see that is that it's connected to, because Uranus is the future and Saturn is the past. So Chiron actually make kind of trying to make sense how the past limitations of your life is actually affecting your future. So Chiron plays a very significant role in my chart, in our chart. But also with Chiron, it could be about self-hatred, denial. It represents shamanism as well. It could represent something to do with domestication of animals too. Chiron was the keeper of ancient routines, animal welfare, the wisdom at hand. Also represent refugees as well. So it might be showing certain type of kind of like where we feel alienated. Yes, wounds, that's the common topic of Chiron, and I haven't really spoken about it, but we have got two types of wounds. And one is the primal wound. And the primal wound is something that we receive as a child. And then we have got the wounds that we actually kind of like accumulate, we receive them as an adult. So if we go through the concept of the upbringing where 75% of our personality is formed by the teachings of the parents, then this is the reason why I urge people to start using Chiron more from a wound around the childhood type of things, because that's highly psychology. And if we manage to kind of like find solution to those problems, then it's not a problem anymore. By the way, the primal wounds are basically often the result of certain type of violation in our early life. And it's kind of like the non-existence. I don't exist. And the very first wound we experience is when mommy walks out of the room and the baby is left alone. So it starts at a very young age, and often we don't remember these. So kind of like the feelings of not being. And then that could show up as loneliness and frustration and betrayal and isolation and shame and guilt as well. So all those are Chironian signatures. I think Chiron invites you to have it's a psychological invitation to turn inwards in that particular part of your chart. So it's very interesting that you have got Chiron in the fifth house, because fifth house is actually the house of psychology. People would be probably associating psychology with a different house, but the fifth house plays a very significant role in psychology because it's a succeeding house, and the succeeding house are very much connected to the physical body, the material world. And the fifth house is the temple of the sun, which is the ego. And therefore it comes with confidence. So it looks like you are basically, turn, for example, some of your childhood experiences into an asset. Your greatest pain has become a greatest tool in your life. And then you do psychology with that, because this is a great way to heal Chiron, by the way, because by helping others to heal, I also go through a healing process as well.
I love the way that you brought that up, actually. And as you were speaking about your childhood development years, I also was bullied because when I came to Australia, I didn't speak English. And so it's amazing that my Chiron's not sitting in the third house, because I was relating to everything that you were saying. So my understanding with Chiron is basically that at some point in our life, we were rejected, and now it's up to us to accept the rejection as a way to integrate it. And then what is it that we do with that acceptance? Do we share it with others? Then this is how we teach and we learn from our wounds, I'm guessing. Is that what you're saying? Like, because I've not ever heard of it that way, and I love the way that you described it.
Yes. So because Chiron is a teacher archetype, we are meant to be actually somehow putting our greatest pain on a stage with that. Freud, there is another concept to Chiron I associate him with, and that's a Freudian psychological concept called the repetition compulsion. And or some people also call it as trauma reenactment or something like that, which is very much about repeating physical or emotional painful situations all over again. So Chiron can give us an answer why we repeat the past all the time. Why? Right? And obviously it comes with certain type of, again, childhood violence. When I'm talking about violence, it's not necessarily physical violence. It could be emotional, psychological, and even kind of like psychic invasion as well. So, for example, if I had experienced, it's a great way to approach it is from the Nessus point of view. So let me talk about Nessus for a couple of seconds, which is the asteroid of abuse. So when we are abused as a child, we might be actually kind of like reacting to that abuse in three different ways, again, according to leading psychologists. And either we become the abusee ourselves, so we become a bully, basically, or potentially we are going to be, let's say, getting married to someone who keeps abusing us because we need that abuse in our life somehow. We feel like we need it. And obviously, this is kind of like a subconscious choice, really. We don't like pain, right? So we don't do that because, oh yeah, please beat me up because that's such a great feeling for me. So that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. So one is that either we surround ourselves with bullies in our life because that's the kind of like, um, something that we are used to, and then we think that we need them around us, or we become the bully, and then, kind of like at school, I'm going to be daring someone to, to, I don't know, climb the roof and then stuff like that, right? So that's the type of bully as well. A very good movie. I like associating archetypes with movies. The Enough movie, actually. Basically, it's who is the main actor there? Jennifer Lopez. And she got married to this beautiful guy, brilliant, all good. 5 years down the line, we are still in love. And then it turned out that the guy was a sex addict, and then he was screwing every single tree on the street. And she just wanted to kind of run away, but the guy threatened her that he would kill her, take the child, and so forth. And then what she did was she actually left, different personality, identity, and so forth. And then she ended up learning certain type of martial art. And then she set up a scene and then basically killed her husband. So she didn't want to kill him, by the way. It was more of an accident. She couldn't kill him, but she got attacked again by the guy and then pushed him and then he fell on a chair. Anyway, so that's a great way to look at actually the Chiron and the Nessus archetype of our chart. So with that Nessus, either I treat others like you were treated, or you surround yourself with people like your own abuser, or you treat yourself in an abusive way. And you're going to be abusing your body, you're going to take drugs and all these type of things. So think about relationship. Usually with Nessus, it starts very passionate. You might feel that you would give up anything for that love, for the love of that person. And after a short while, the relationship starts struggling due to kind of like awakening that I'm not receiving what I signed up for. And typically, this is because we come into a relationship with expectations and we think it's the perfect one, and then we don't see the mask. We just see what we want to see. So yes, so that's Chiron for me from a repetition compulsion point of view. And by the way, it comes with different shapes and forms. So one of the example of this repetition compulsion is the detachment. So for example, it refers to a person's inability to fully engage with their feelings or the feelings of others. So for example, kind of like violent beating in their childhood, and then they might choose again detachment as a coping mechanism. So we sweep things under the carpet. Or the other part is the familiarity. So someone who grew up in a distant family might be looking for a partner who is also distant in their relationship. Or self-hatred. They feel they deserve mistreatment in their lives, so therefore we're going to be attracting someone who mistreats them. Or the abandonment, clinging to the past relationship, becoming possessive, trying to avoid more rejections in relationships. So these are, and then we have got the triggers of the past emotion that comes with this as well. And then we get angry as an adult. It's usually because we get neglected. And that's again connected to that possessiveness. And then we have got the fear motivated behavior, which obviously I think it, pretty much describes. So with Chiron, we need to be looking at what is behind that trauma. And as I said, this is a trauma that you might not remember. The other thing that Chiron can talk to you about is actually object relations, but I'm not going to go into that because that's a major topic as well. But just think about a baby when they don't want to give up their favorite little toy. And basically, it's a psychoanalytic theory. And basically, that little toy is the representation of your biological basic drives. So Chiron also represents that, such as the breastfeeding. So often we see with Chiron that, oh, this is a good breast. Oh, this is a bad breast. That's how the babies kind of function. So mommy takes away the breast. Oh, you are nasty. You are an evil. And then as soon as mommy comes back with the boobies, then, oh, you are a saint. So that's also kind of like a Chiron psychological stuff. So the sign position of the Chiron talks to you about specific wounds that causing recurring issues, themes, and problems in your life. And the house position is where the wound is going to be expressed. And if we talk about that Saturn and Uranus, Chiron being the bridge builder, which I'm not too sure if actually, there was research done about it because Chiron has got a funny orbit, and some Chiron positions are easier and some Chiron positions are more difficult, depending on whether it's orbiting around the Saturn or orbiting around Uranus. But let me not go into that because that's going to be very difficult. But but if Chiron is in the middle of Leo from from late degrees of Scorpio to about 5 degrees of Sagittarius, then actually Chiron is somewhere right in the middle of Saturn and Uranus. That's one of the easier position of Chiron because we are able to see the past and we are able to see the future as well. So we are somehow on the middle ground, just as an example. But some Chiron positions are more difficult and some are actually easier. So, just a quick one on that object relation. So as an example, so that we can understand. For example, my mother is good because she feeds me when I'm hungry. So that's the representation of the object. And how the baby translates it is that the fact that she takes care of me, feeds me, it means I'm good. So that's the representation of the self in relation to the object. And then the translation, the next step is going to be, oh, I love mom because she takes care of me. So that's the representation of the relationship. So if it's not working somewhere, that's when we become jealous, obsessive, possessive. We are unable to give up on our home, or we are attached to a toaster or a oven or pictures and all this type of stuff. So that is a indication of Chiron being a major issue in your life.
So, Victor, So what I'm hearing, and sorry, have I interrupted something that you were about to say?
No, not at all.
I was just thinking, so the way that you were describing Chiron is basically, depending on the sign, is the wound
Yeah,
that you see Chiron that is here to express, and the house is the place that it needs to express it from. Is that correct?
that's right. So, for example, Chiron in the fifth house, what's the sign? Oh, I lost your voice. I cannot hear you.
Sorry, I had myself on mute. So my Chiron is in my fifth house, and my fifth house is Pisces. So my Chiron is Pisces.
Okay, so we have got a Piscean wound here. And the Pisces is the unconditional love, for example. So I'm just gonna pick one topic here, or the creativity. So maybe you wanted to be a ballet dancer, for example, and then mommy said, "No way that you can make money out of ballet. So you know what? Forget about it. Just become a go-go dancer, for example, because that's definitely gonna give you money." So that's one kind of like way we can look at it. And then the house position is the area of life where it happens. So this is a childhood trauma where something got rejected there, where something I felt abandoned, therefore I didn't feel supported. And maybe that's connected to the Piscean themes of our life. So creativity, unconditional love. I wasn't encouraged to become a singer, and I've always wanted to become an actor, for example. But I don't know, it highly depends on the aspects, of course. But let's say that Chiron is squared by Venus, for example, because we didn't have the money to become an actor, and I couldn't go to the drama school. Or I was told that you are not beautiful enough to become an actress. So forget about it. It's like a little bit of a Lady Gaga house position where she was told back in the days that, listen, you are too ugly to do ballet, like ballads. So you need to be doing these monster songs and so forth, because that's the way how we're going to make you successful. So that's the type of interpretation guidelines we can give. Of course, it highly depends on the aspects. I'm just giving two examples here. And it highly depends on many other factors as well, such as where Jupiter is in the natal chart, because we are able to specify those wounds even more. But this is the way how we can interpret. And then obviously object relationships, the object relation category is that the fifth house is something to do with also romance. So typically that's the age 14 to 20 from a psychological point of view, the fifth house. So this could be the representation of the first love as well, how I got rejected by the first love, and then how I'm still holding on to that for some reason. And maybe I haven't been able to let go, and that Pisces. If we have been able to let go, obviously that's great. If we haven't, then unfortunately, I might not be able to trust others because the fifth house squares the eighth. It's squaring the second house, so I'm still struggling with self-worth issues, and therefore I might reject going on a date. I might reject, uh, I don't know, kind of like, let's say if you have got Vesta there as well, conjuncting Chiron, then I might become a nun, and then I refuse to have sexual intercourse with others, and so forth. Now, I have really kind of squared it to I did that to kind of like demonstrate with the polarities of the interpretation guidelines, but of course it can be a lot more subtle. It highly depends on Jupiter and the supporting aspects and so on.
I've got Jupiter in my eighth house, Gemini. So I could absolutely relate the whole relationship thing 100%. So yeah, excellent. I am conscious of your time, and I did want to talk about Firdaria, if that would be okay, if we've got a moment to talk about, I guess is it used as a predictive tool for, is it perfection?
No.
No.
Firdaria is more of a kind of like a chapter of your lives, pretty much. So planets are more active for a certain amount of time in your life. It depends on whether you were born as a day, like a day person or a night person, and then it divides life into chapters. So, for example, Saturn is a 30-year chapter in your life. Venus is going to be a 8-year chapter in your life, and so forth. And then each chapter is broken down into little segments, little categories. So, for example, if we are looking at the Venusian period of your life, which is 8 years, then basically it's going to be, let's say, one moment it's going to be a Venus and Jupiter period of your life. And it's going to be a smaller portion of the 8 years. So let's say it's going to last for 11 months. Just it's going to be actually about 13 months, but doesn't matter. So, and then it takes over, and then it's going to be a Venus Saturn. And then it takes over, it's going to be a Venus Sun, Venus Moon, Venus Mercury, Venus Mars, and so forth, because it's going to be happening in the Chaldean order of the planets, or the Chaldean order of the planets, whatever ways we want to pronounce it. And the quality of those planets in your life is going to talk to you about the quality of that period. And obviously, the house positions are going to be the representation of what two area of your life are going to be the most impacted. This is a highly functional but easy timing technique, actually. It comes from the 2nd century, someone called Valence. He introduced different type of timing techniques such as profection, zodiacal releasing, and so forth. And then about 30 years ago, we found his books and then they started translating them. So these are actually new in the modern astrological society, but they are really ancient timing techniques.
I love it. I love it. So, like I said, I am conscious of of your time. We'll have to come back on, get you back on the show because I've got lots of questions around the asteroids and so forth, and healing aspects of the body. The way that we wrap up the show is we always love to ask our guests to leave us with 3 shiny golden nuggets. So, what would be those 3 shiny golden nuggets, Victor, that you would like to leave for our guests?
Well, I guess I have given the golden nuggets during the show, but to summarize on them is that always work with the higher manifestation of the planets. Don't be afraid of difficult aspects. Don't be afraid of Saturn and Mars and square and an opposition and so forth. Try to use them. Like a Saturn Mars square is going to talk to you about willpower. So make sure that you have got that. That's one of them. The next one is that probably start integrating in your astrological journey a couple of major asteroids, not because they are going to be giving you like extra info, but they are going to be specifying the issue for you, which you might not be able to pick up through the natal chart. So Chiron, again, accept that part of your chart. Probably that's very important. And also, maybe one more is that astrology should never determine your life, and you should never be afraid of it. So what I mean by that is that I see a lot of astrological communities that also I've got I don't know, Saturn in my 7th house and I'm doomed, right? And or it's Mercury retrograde, even better. Mercury retrograde, I'm not gonna go on a date because what's the point? And stop doing that. You are taking experiences away from you. You are taking away learning curves from you. So, and I hate it when they give advice that, oh, Mercury retrograde, don't go on a date, don't buy a laptop and all these type of things. Mercury is such a misunderstood planet, but maybe we talk about that another time because it's nothing to do with not buying and signing contracts and stuff. It's a lot bigger than that.
I love the fact that you brought that up because I'm very much like you, Victor. I think that we should look at it as the astrological alignment is like a weather forecast for me. It's how we dance with it. It's not about stopping you living your life. And there are a lot of astrologers out there, and God bless them. I'm not putting them down by any means, but very predictive. And so you hear quite often sometimes, oh my God, doom and gloom. It's going to be this, it's going to be that, rather than look at like, it's interesting. Let's see, how can I use the highest expression of these planets, like you were saying, and dance with them in that way. I love it. So, Victor, I would love to hear if you're going to do a course on the drawings. Let us know, because I know there's going to be a lot of, I've never heard of it, and I'm interested, and I know there's going to be a lot of people interested in absolutely doing that course. And where do you hang out the most?
What we can do is that if your viewers make a comment that they would be interested, and then we've got a certain number, then I'm more than happy to put one together for you, and then just let me know.
Oh, that would be amazing. I would love to do that. We'll organize it for you. That would be fantastic. So where do you hang out the most? Is it Instagram, YouTube?
I'm currently in Morocco.
Okay. Yep.
I just arrived a couple of days ago, and previously I was in Thailand, so I'm all over the place actually.
Yeah. Okay. We'll have all your links in our show notes. I want to say thank you so much, Victor, for your time, your energy, and I learned a lot today. So thank you once again. Namaste, and I look forward to having you back on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank
Have a good one, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
you.